stunning looks than swift.
A game to savor for the ages, a game to remember for so much that happened in 724 runs, a record in a World Cup knockout. It was just 100 overs of pure World Cup entertainment that only this format can provide. The Wankhede will remember it. India will remember it. They are through to the final of the 2023 ICC Men's Cricket World Cup, a first ever 50-over men's final for them since it happened at this ground 12 years ago. New Zealand bow out in typical New Zealand fashion, huffing and puffing and putting everything into it in a game that Rohit Sharma knew that he needed every one of those 397 runs his batters put up as comfort, as luxury. When Daryl Mitchell and Kane Williamson stitched together a partnership of 182, four teams together couldn't put these sort of runs against this bowling attack. But Mohammed Shami's record-breaking 7 for 57 just adds to the list of records we've seen today on the 15th of November at the Wankhede Stadium. Set up by Kohli's 50th ODI 100, Shreyas Iyer with a second consecutive 100, Rohit Sharma with a start that won't feature on the summary but set the tone. And in response, what a knock from Mitchell, the first 100 in a losing cause in a World Cup semi-final as New Zealand bow out. India win by 70. It's a big margin, but that game had more moments than that scorecard or summary will suggest. We look back and unwrap all of it on Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday, powered by Qatar Airways. We'll hear from Danny Morrison shortly, who just could not fall asleep with this sort of game. Neither could Matthew Hayden nor Anil Kumble. What a game, and where to start? We've seen history with bat, with ball. Anil, a 7-4 for a bowler, and yet it didn't seem as easy as any game before. Give me your first thoughts on why this win stands out for India.
I think the persistent effort of the bowling attack. Yes, 397, of course, India outbatted New Zealand, basically having that cushion when you're defending a total. And the way Shami started off his spell, right from ball one, once he got Conway out, it was tough going for New Zealand, but that partnership between Kane Williamson and Daryl Mitchell, I mean, both of them batted brilliantly. At one stage, if they held on for another possible 8 to 9 overs, they still had a chance. And then India could have been in trouble going into the last 10 overs with 100, 110 runs at the Wankhede is doable. We have seen that on many occasions during the IPL when you have wickets in hand. But again, Shami comes in and gets that crucial wicket, back-to-back 2 wickets in an over, and changed the complexion of the game. So fantastic effort. I thought Rohit led once again, really well. Used his 5 bowlers. 2 overs of Kuldeep after that 40th over was also crucial.
Absolutely.
So every over in a 50-over game, when you score 397, yes, the margin said 70 runs, but every over was crucial, and India got it right.
I love Anil Kumble. Will always bring up those 2 crucial overs that his spinner bowled. He's right. It didn't.
It is. Yeah.
He went for 1 run, and then he got a wicket in the next, in the 42nd and 44th. But that's when you felt like, yep, they're slowly just nailing the coffins. The difference in this game, Matthew Hayden.
Rohit's captaincy, he didn't let the game drift, didn't panic. I mean, you could look at his face. India went missing there for maybe half an hour. It was a crazy 30 minutes of wonderful batting from Mitchell, supported also by the skipper, Kane Williamson. But he didn't let that sort of affect the team. What he did was he pulled back his main men. He said, right, this is time now to take a wickets, and that's exactly what happened. There was 2 or 3 wickets back to back there, and then the tables turned. So for me, the batting was still extraordinary.
Yes.
When you look at both teams, maybe Kohli's 100 was maybe the less of all of them. Can you believe that? Such a monumental milestone 100 most ever. I mean, that would be the celebration most times, but because you've just got such key other Shreyas Iyer's 100 and obviously Mitchell's 100, they were both brilliant hundreds.
You scored 327, Danny Morrison. You expect to win, certainly against this bowling attack. They gave it everything. What was missing?
I just think, again, we've mentioned it, Devon Conway. You needed a lot more from him. And then Rachera, unfortunately for him, well, both got the unlucky devil scores, didn't they? 13. Both got 13 and got out. And that's where, you look at India's top order. that just makes such a difference, doesn't it? When your top four are going so well, and then you throw in someone else who comes in and plays a wonderful hand, which was Cal Rahul late this afternoon. It stands out. And so collectively, as Haydos and Anil were saying, I think that the batting there is just so dynamic, and it puts a lot of pressure on the side that have to go out and chase a big total. But I also listened to Ravi Shastri there. It was interesting that I wondered if a little bit more slickness would come around, and he said that dew factor that is so often the case, it certainly wasn't. And those little things can make a little bit of a difference. But really, for me, you've touched on it, gentlemen, with your captain and not panicking, but also have someone to go to. And you've seen it over the years with the great Aussie side. You can go to a Shane Warne or a Glenn McGrath and pick up a wicket right when the skipper needs him. And Shami to come in a little bit later into the tournament and then just kick off the way he has is just magnificent. It really begs belief at times. And then again, from my perspective, watching that release of his over the years, it's just simply outstanding. No one's better. Getting the seam upright, and then he's worked on his slower cutters and his changes of pace and tennis ball bounces. So for me, clearly the obvious man of the match. But for a captain to have someone like that to go to, and you've not just got him, of course you've got Bumrah. And when, Siraj is going well, he's pretty useful. And then, of course, I love, as you say, RK, you've got to mention the spinners, Anil. And pleased for Kuldeep, I really was, because he got battered a couple of times. But you throw in someone that's a little bit different. And I think that, again, blends in beautifully with a mix of India going into that final.
Yeah, a couple of really nice points we can extend on that Danny raises in his opening comments. The luxury of having bowlers that you perhaps don't need to hide or don't need to get their overs out of the way. I think we can say now, Anil, that Shami's inclusion perhaps is the single most point of difference in the defence of a chase of 220, a score of 229 against England, and in a game like this where you felt like two batters are taking it away. This is massive, and India didn't start with him. Somewhere this was clearly a blessing. They were obviously a strong side with Hardik Pandya, but what a difference Mohammed Shami has made.
Yes, and the kind of bowler he is. I mean, 5 wicket takers you have in this lineup, which perhaps was the difference between the two sides.
Yes.
Because both sides batted really well. Outstanding batting efforts. The difference was that fifth bowler. And fifth bowler being Shami in this case, and then Rachin Ravindra and Glenn Phillips in New Zealand's case. So that was the biggest difference. And yes, it's been a blessing in disguise with Shami coming in because of Hardik's injury. And he's made a massive impact to this side in terms of the way the entire bowling attack is now looking. It's not just about Bumrah. Of course, Bumrah sets the tone like Rohit sets the tone with the batting. And then Shami picking wickets right from his first over. Yeah. And he's just kept it simple. All he's done is just bowled a good length, hitting the stumps all the time and asking questions. And he's been brilliant.
Yep. I mean, you also think that the balance of the team is something that we keep discussing. And New Zealand went with this balance. But today their 2 strike bowlers went for 186 and 20 overs at 10s and 8s. Today India had a Siraj who had an off day. Normally that costs you when you have to find yourself a 6th bowler. But do you sense that the same point that I just raised, but Shami is the difference between a bowler coming in who may or may not back up Bumrah if he doesn't get wickets?
Yeah, we'll all look back at this tournament and identify that Shami is the difference. And the reason for what Anil just mentioned there is just... but the other thing is, it's not just the one bowler. Danny mentioned, some of those greats in the past for the Australian side. They've all played an extensive amount of cricket together now.
Yep.
Perhaps Siraj is perhaps the guy that's a bit of an outsider compared to Bumrah and Shami. So they know exactly the roles that they've each got to play. They're slightly different roles. In fact, I'd say they're vastly different roles. You've got really, the common denominator is they all can bowl with a straight seam and scrambled seam, bowl off cutters and bowl quick enough to bowl decent bounces as well. But Shami, for mine, is the highlight of that bowling attack currently.
But Danny, why don't you extend on what you started off with? What impresses you? You're the fast bowler on the panel today. And clearly there is something that Shami does that just increases his ability to pick up wickets. Whether newish ball, first change, or even that double strike of Williamson and Latham, it just seemed to settle India. How does Shami get wickets? How is he getting wickets like no one else is?
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you guys are so blessed with different styles of bowlers, and you look at the awkward run-up of Bumrah and how he presents at the crease, and as a coach too, with my coach, and you go, well, you know, you're going to have lots of injuries, or how can you not get rhythm to the crease? And you coached all of that from a young age, and so you look at that mix. But with Mohammed Shami in particular, his rhythm, you see the way he gathers himself, and he's more classical and bustles in. And what I like about him is the tenacity that he's come back and been able to, as Anil touched on, is to be able to bowl later on and learn to bowl in the middle stages, not just be a specialist with the new ball and then right at the end. Everyone's got to play their part and bowl in the middle. This day and age, so much more evolved as a game because of T20 and what that's created, is that you have to have maybe 2 or 3 slower balls, and you have to be able to come back at any given time and maybe just bowl 12 balls out of your 60 to come back and do that. And with Shami and his confidence and his rhythm, for me, which is key, it just shows you how much more consistent he's been with the release of the ball. So often it's upright. And then when you don't want it to be upright, they want it to be subtly scrambled and just hold it subtly different, or just a little bit of a change at the point of release in your wrist. And so he's got that all clicking for him now beautifully. And so I agree with the others. I think he's been the big fire starter, if you like. He's been the one who's ignited things when he's played and come into the side because of Pandya's injury. Hasn't it been a blessing? And hasn't he come back? And I think probably proved a few others wrong. You know, because he is the other side of 30 now, he's doing a hell of a job. And he is, look, let's face it, at the end of the day, he's quality.
Yep.
Siraj also coming around the wicket. I like his courage to do that. You know, he bowled that one dreadful oval, but apart from that, his figures would be a lot better than what those numbers would suggest. But coming around out of the hitting zone tonight, it was really, really important. It's something that will be important. You know, whoever the power hitters are for either Australia or South Africa in the final, it'll be important to get away from that zone where he can get crunched down the ground. And Mitchell was almost locked into thinking one way there. Yep. He wasn't tending to think either going through third man, he was just going straight downtown. So smart bowling, good execution. Would be disappointed, I'm sure, tonight, Siraj, but I'm pretty certain his captain wouldn't be. Yeah,
that's the point you made at the start, that India seemed to be tactically right up there, other than the fact that their batting and bowling is clicking. Something like we saw from Siraj round the wicket. It throws the Daryl Mitchell off, perhaps upsets his own rhythm. You find them tactically as perhaps the best team of the tournament.
Yeah, well, look, he was trialling that as well in the previous match. So he's come out in a bigger game, a semi-final. You know, pressure was on. That was the key wicket at the time, and they had 3 or 4 quiet overs in combination with Jadeja. So, you know, ultimately, tactically, and I've said this about Rohit now pretty much the whole tournament, he is sharp, he knows his team know how it is that they're individually going about their business, and collectively also as a bowling unit, they're impressive.
The Shami feat, and who'd think that this is the feat that we discussed first? Yes, we celebrated Kohli's historic 50th ODI 100, and that is something that the game may not see for a long, long time. But with Shami, there's a 50 to celebrate as well, and that is India's most prolific bowler now in World Cups. That's 54 wickets. He's anyway right up there. The 2023 edition sees him top of the tree, and he's only played the 6 games. Came in after Hardik Pandya's injury against Bangladesh. He's got 3 5-fers, including a 7-fer, 1 4-fer, and a 2-fer. So that's what Shami stands at. I guess we tend to think of Zaid Khan as India's greatest white ball seamer, and the fact that it married well with India's 2011 World Cup win. India need to win one more game, but has Shami etched his name as India's greatest white ball seamer?
Yeah, yes. I mean, those numbers certainly prove that. And today he's picked up the best Indian effort by an Indian, to get 7 wickets in an ODI. So fantastic. Just those 6 matches and 23 wickets in a World Cup and 7 wickets in a semi-final when it's been a flat deck. I mean, we've seen 700 runs, 730 runs being scored, and he picks up a 7 first. So yes, he's certainly one of those greatest ever white ball bowlers that India has had. And yes, one more game. I'm sure he'll be going back to his hometown, so to speak, because he plays for Gujarat in Ahmedabad, and I'm sure he'll be waiting for that ball to come to him.
And just talking about that home ground, and often so is the case with these great champions, that they find a way to stay in the game. As Danny mentioned, you know, he's the other side of 30, but he's found a way to do the very simple thing, and the essence of fast bowling or great batting is to do a great deal of it. You know, so even when he had his injury concerns, he would go into his backyard, literally, and just be bowling. You know, and he's as strong as an ox. Like, when you look at just his strength and presence at the crease, when you're facing an opposition bowler, when you know that that's actually has got that great composure, because the greats just, they find a way to stay in the game. And even Jadeja, like, he just presents his action. Anil Kumble presented his action repetitiously, and they do that time and time again. It's a great fighting story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, batter records tend to get broken very quickly. I'm sure you and Danny, as bowlers on the panel, maybe even Haydos, the fact that bowlers can get this record today makes it even more special. It's not as easy a time for bowlers now as it is for batters in comparison to your generation.
Yeah, not easy at all. I mean, when a bowler picks up a 6-fer or a 5-fer or a 7-fer, which is very rare.
Yeah.
It's only happened 3 times or 3 or 4 times in a World Cup in the last so many years. So, yes, fantastic effort from Shami, especially defending a total. That makes it even more special when you have done it and won the game for your team, and then now you move on to the finals.
Anyone willing to christen him as India's greatest white ball bowler?
I'll christen him.
Yep.
He is going to be India's greatest white ball bowler, when or if India win the World Cup.
Yep. That's important, isn't it, that last bit? Danny?
Yeah, you got to win it. That's the thing. Again, there's so much expectation. You've touched on it. They won it in 2011, and then they've had this tricky time. The Champions Trophy, that was in England, wasn't it? That was 2013. And they've been close quite a few times, of course, get to semis and that. And I think, once again, I love that line, the land of a billion. There's such an expectation, and you want to do well, and you want to win things. And the crowd is just so passionate. The fan base is extraordinary. So we all know that and appreciate that. So when I look at guys like Shami and his sort of, if you like, a bit of a mini comeback to this Indian 50-over side, it speaks volumes for those guys that really want to do well, and particularly because it's in their own backyard. I find it hard to not say that he's their best bowler, white ball bowler ever.
All right, let's go to the batters though, shall we? Yes, we've given them some serious praise, the Indian bowlers, Shami, and the supporting role that Bumrah and Kuldeep have done to make sure that India get on the right side of this result. But the points you all made in the opening, you and Danny Haydos, the collective performance of the top 4 or 5 in a World Cup semi-final. I can only think of one more team. And you know what that feels like. That effectively has been the difference today. India get 350, or they fall short, or they get 340, and it could be a different game.
I suppose we're all looking for the cracks in India. We were looking today to see how they were going to handle semi-final pressure. As Danny says, the land of a billion. How are they going to perform at Wankhede Stadium? You know, one of the cauldrons from an Indian cricketing fan's point of view, but also as a player. And they just lived up to the task. And again, it was set straight up in the tone of the captain, Rohit Sharma. You know, he came out and just blazed his way, as did Shubman Gill, to a very, very solid, quick foundation play. And then it was allowing then Kohli to come into play and do what Kohli does. Bat extended periods of time, occupy the crease, rotate the strike, run hard, hit the odd boundary in combination with Shreyas Iyer, who's now a genuine find, you know, throughout Indian cricket. But that's a performance that he'll never forget. That'll be a performance that he'll probably hold on to now for another 2 World Cups. You know, so India have suddenly got these great replacement generational players as well for when the Rohit Sharmas and the Virat Kohlis, you know, cease to play. And it's an extraordinary effort from Shreyas Iyer. I mean, I said today, number 4 player was going to be a key from both teams. Both of them had hundreds. To me, still, Shreyas Iyer's innings was just marginally better than Mitch.
Yeah. I mean, looking at Shreyas Iyer at the 100, that last line is important. 8 sixes. The ability of Shreyas Iyer to just tonk sixes. You'd argue with Daryl Mitchell 7 sixes and 9 fours. That's 16 boundaries. Perhaps those 2 innings cancel each other out. But We almost go back to Rohit for a reason that he may not feature on summaries or the top run getters chart now, but his impact to let the rest of the innings flow the way it does. And perhaps now it's clearly, we can see it, the role that Kohli and Rohit played together. You almost have to read them as one score. 164 of 132. That's what the two of them are putting together.
Yeah, the difference was Rohit's score. I mean, those 30-40s, which he sort of takes the game away at the start itself. Otherwise, India would have perhaps ended with 350. And then New Zealand would have thought, oh, okay, you know, you don't have to go that hard.
Yeah.
And you never know, 350. So, yes, that's the difference. And not just that, the kind of intimidation that sort of has on the bowlers and also on the skipper, on the opposition skipper, especially when you're looking out for your fifth bowler, and that becomes a challenge. And today, Lockie Ferguson didn't have the greatest of, he hasn't had a greatest of World Cups with a bit of injury coming back, and then two main bowlers going for runs. So it straight away puts pressure on the opposition, and that's exactly how Rohit has done that. Been aggressive with his intent with the bat, scored runs, and he's been aggressive as a captain too.
Ahead of the 2007 World Cup, I want to share with you a story that I had a conversation with John Buchanan, and he was having concerns around whether or not I was batting deep enough into the innings. This is on the impact of Rohit Sharma. And fundamentally I disagreed, probably for one of the first times in my career with John Buchanan, because in my view, the 2007, and nothing's changed, this World Cup, if you're going to have impact players of the likes of Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill, in our case it was Hayden and Gilchrist in that World Cup, if we were to bat 15 overs, the heart of the opposition was in our hands. And so, similarly, when you look at the way that they started and the impact of the two openers, and then the continuation of the great players, you know, that we're now seeing come through the Indian side. Virat Kohli, obviously, one of the great, probably the greatest now in one-day cricket. And then you've got these impact players that sit around that. That was the same as Andrew Simons or a Michael Clark or these characters that could just continue the innings. But right up top, the tone gets set, the opposition's eyes roll back, and all of a sudden you've got TKO pretty much ready to go. And that's the way I saw this game today. 300 and almost 497. That is TKO.
Yeah, and also if you look at the opposition captain, I mean, he's made 4 changes within the 10 overs. You've got to use your bowlers and then figuring out, okay, who's going to be successful here. And that's happened consistently throughout this World Cup.
Yes.
Whenever India has taken on
one of the great captains of the game in Kane Williamson. Yet you're stretching him in the first 40 minutes of the game. To illustrate Matthew Hayden's point, if we just look at how the teams stacked up comparison-wise at every 10 overs or so, this perhaps is one way of looking at this game. India are almost 40 runs ahead at the start of the game. Start your innings at 40 and that'll be nice. But if you just look at how New Zealand went, let me put it for perspective. New Zealand at the 10 over mark were 46 for 2. India were 84 for 1. At the 20 over mark, 124. India 150 for 1. They then continued to build steadily. And of course, unfortunately, they just run out of gas, as you would, with a chase of 398, which would have been a record in World Cup cricket in itself.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes the heavy lifting. We're looking at finishers. The openers can do their job at perhaps an easier time when the field is in and the onus is on you then to
if
make
you
it
get
happen.
early shots in a boxing match, it makes a huge difference. I mean, of course, finishers have a huge role. They could well play a huge role, as we mentioned, for tomorrow night's semi-final.
Yes.
Klassen, versus our boy. It's just extraordinary batting that we saw in Bangalore. Mumbai. So ultimately they matter, but it shouldn't matter as much, because when you look at that New Zealand, those last 10 overs, there was so much pressure, right? That the finishers, are they really going to do it in that situation? That's where the challenge lies.
It's Danny's point on the top of the order today for New Zealand. It's similar to Dharamshala with the Australia game. They just left too much to do at the end. Danny, please, if you'd like to add something.
Well, even just throwing into the mix with cricket nuffies that'll be watching this and loving it, you peel it back the history of the game, and let's even go more to the start of white ball, because the first part of the World Cup's that the gentleman sitting inside there wouldn't have played tonight. It was my first World Cup was in the subcontinent, 87, with white clothing and red ball. Fast forward to 1992 and up to the present day now. Let's look at a certain guy, and I know I'm wearing probably black and got an eye patch on, but Mark Greatbatch was doing a bit what Matty Hayden was doing way back in 1992 to set the tone and say, hey, listen, I'm coming at you. And Batchy, man, did he initiate the way the game changed. And then, of course, the next World Cup, you had Syria and Kalawathanara. So you had that being set and thinking, hang on a minute, there's something to this. And you've already touched on it, Haydos, magnificently. But I wanted to peel back the history of there because I totally agree. And as a new ball bowler going up front and getting clotted by Haydos myself in the mid-90s, and finishing up, was that guys that came at you put the pressure back on the new ball bowlers inside the first 10 overs because of the restrictions of the field. It was a no-brainer. And it took someone like a Greatbatch and then Syria and Kalu to kick on, and we've seen it develop, haven't we? We've seen what Gilchrist's been able to do. A.B. de Villiers and the like have changed and moved up to open to make the most of the first 10 overs. It's a no-brainer. And then to be currently, as you're on about RK, you saw that when Devon Conway and Rachera got stuck into England and could do what they were doing. And it just shows you at the top where it's possibly, as Haydos is saying, in a way it's a bit easier. And it just shocks the opposition. They're immediately thrown on the back foot. As you rightly say, I love your analogy, Haydos, a couple of uppercuts and a nice little thrust there. And you are on the back foot massively, and it often is really hard to recover.
And the other thing for New Zealand also is Tom Latham hasn't really fired at all in this World Cup. That's a big ask for Kane Williamson to carry. Daryl Mitchell has been brilliant. Yes, these two, but you look at in comparison to a KL Rahul who bats at 5 and Tom Latham at 5, and that's been the big difference for New Zealand as well. Even when they lost those 4 matches on the trot, it was Tom Latham who was not really getting those runs for New Zealand.
On that note, perhaps let's reflect on New Zealand's campaign. They bow out yet again after making a semi-final. Finalists of the last 2 editions, so this is one step short. And as Kane Williamson, as I speak right now, addresses the press conference, we wonder if it might be the last time we see Kane Williamson in World Cup cricket. You'd certainly think so. Who knows how much more he still has to offer. He had to push his way with some poor and ridiculous luck when it came to injuries, and he still signed off on a high with the player that he is. Maybe we're seeing the last of it. Danny Morrison, Kane Williamson, Tim Southee, Trent Boult, often christened as the greatest ever batch of New Zealand cricketers playing together. It's a sad way to end, but what an innings it's been.
Oh, and let's be also, from that perspective, and with Anil there and Matty Hayden there, you've played for a long time, and be grateful and be blessed that you have. And so when I look at the way Williamson, Boult, and Southee have been together, I was fortunate enough to be there in KL and see them in that under-19 where Virat Kohli and a certain Indian under-19 side lifted the trophy there in Malaysia. So those guys have all come through together and they've had a wonderful time. What a journey. And then not to forget too that the Test Championship with the Mace, that'll stand out hugely for them in terms of winning a tournament or winning an ICC event that means so much. And so for little old New Zealand and those guys that you mentioned, I think yes, they'll be upset they've come second tonight, but really I think they'll be immensely proud. And they've got such wonderful memories of what they've actually achieved as a group, particularly in the last decade, for really a winter playing nation. When you think about how big rugby union is, it's just so massive. I make that analogy all the time. Rugby in New Zealand is what cricket is to India in the land of a billion. It is that big.
Yeah, I mean, you think that they just somehow willed their way to one more World Cup, but their best chance of it was Lord's 2019. And you brought it up pre-match as well. I mean, you could almost feel like Williamson deserved to lift a World Cup at some point, and he didn't lose a final, but for a technicality. But somehow, let's just say, while they were one of the great teams of the last time, they were falling short of the top 3. They've managed to get in the top 4 here. They lost a lot of games, especially to the other semi-finalists and to Pakistan. Perhaps a fair reflection of New Zealand?
Yeah, I liken it to, I don't know if you've done too many 400s in your time, or for those viewers out there done 400-metre running races, you start off like a rocket, you go around the first corner, you hit that sort of back straight and you think, oh, I'm on fire here, and then you get to the last corner and suddenly your opposition start to catch up, and then as you turn the corner and head to the finishing line, it's just got to hang on with courage and guts, and that's it. Your legs are gone, you've got nothing in your chest, and you just somehow find a way to poke over. That's New Zealand's campaign right there.
Critically, when they came to India, though, and I think this will touch upon your favourite subject again, they missed some key elements perhaps to have the difference.
Yes, certainly. I mean, their bowling attack, we felt that Ish Sodhi and Mitch Santner would have been a great combination. We have seen that with Shamsi and Maharaj. Maharaj has certainly stood out. Mitch Santner has certainly stood out for New Zealand, but he hasn't had too much support coming in. I mean, you need two spinners bowling in tandem, just like how you have two fast bowlers in Bolt and Saudi. You also need another spinner bowling in tandem. I mean, that's one of the reasons why India is successful as well. You have Kuldeep and Jadeja bowling together, and when you have these kind of conditions, if you have two good solid bowlers, then it becomes a totally different combination. And that's one thing that New Zealand sort of missed out on. You saw his form. He did play just that one game in Bangalore, which was tough for him when Fakhar Zaman got hold of him, and it was tough. So that to me has been the biggest challenge for New Zealand, and those injuries certainly didn't help.
I think the weight on Tommy Latham as well.
Yeah,
you know, as captain, where it went great at the start, and then got really tough. No Kane Williamson at that stage. And then his own form starting to struggle on the back of all of those pressures in a World Cup title. So the race was on.
Yep.
So generally, just to add to Danny, I think it's 2 decades when you think about it. This New Zealand side has punched way above its weight. They've been great fighters. They've had some wonderful champions. Some of which we may see retire, like Kane Williamson. But gosh, they just should hold their heads up, completely high, because they have been fantastic competitors in all these ICC events now for 2 decades.
Future still bright though, Danny. This tournament will be remembered for Achin Ravindran. None of us saw that coming. Batter who didn't bat in the top 3 suddenly comes in and blazes his way to all sorts of records, can bowl some handy spin. But also, I guess at the same time, followers of New Zealand cricket or those invested in the future of New Zealand cricket would be wondering if there is the depth. They struggled with the injuries to Matt Henry, Lockie Ferguson, Jimmy Neesham, even Kane. The next crop of players, do New Zealand have it in them to go one step further? It's another World Cup where it's not the final hurdle for New Zealand, but how do you see the next few years for New Zealand?
Oh, well, yeah, and can Ruchera, can he develop his spin, as Anil was saying, to hang in there with Mitch? Mitch Santner, I think he's just 30, so you really could see some maturing better years from Mitch if he stays fit and lean and hungry, which he should do. And then Ruchera, developing his bowling that much more. Can Kyle Jamieson, can he become fitter and stronger and be a bit more consistently on the park? There's a kid, Finn Allen. I think we saw him a little bit late last year up against the Aussies at the Sydney Cricket Ground. He is an exciting talent, no doubt. Glenn Phillips, interesting character, isn't he? I mean, he was a keeper opening batter, and now he's fiddling with his off spinners. And so let's see if he can develop a bit more. So there's a sort of bunch of guys that are just on the edge trying to come in to replace the likes of Southey and Bolt. Will be challenging, no doubt, for guys of that magnitude of their sort of class. And then that other big question you put out there: how long does Kane Williamson go for? That's the next big question, given the sort of injury he had with his ACL. Really frustrating, and he is in his mid-30s now. So that's just the reality, isn't it? Father Time ticks on. So it will be fascinating, gents, to see the next crop that come through and how good they're going to be.
I also think it's as much about being cherry-picked for the franchise leagues of the world and the future and longevity of even, the broader question around ODI cricket, its relevance. But it's no more so relevant for a side like New Zealand or a nation like New Zealand, similarly to the West Indies as well, that, have these wonderful homegrown talent, great athletic ability, because as Danny said, they're cut of the cloth of athletic ability, because most of them are playing rugby union at a young age. So athletically, they develop superbly. They've got great hand-eye coordination, and franchises like Rachin Ravindra, he'll be so tempted to get out of mainstream cricket and into franchise cricket and league cricket all over the world.
Yep. Sure, you will hear from him. There's an auction coming up in just over a month's time from now, and who knows, Daryl Mitchell might have done himself some favours too, the way he's ended the tournament or played in it. Rachin Ravindra certainly. But as we just wrap things up, I will end with India, who now march to Ahmedabad in what could, I think, be a pretty reasonable crowd for the World Cup final in a few days' time.
Yes.
What does this win do for this team, where I'm sure even they would have said, yeah, we bossed it, but we've got to win the semi-final, and it was a tough semi-final. What does this do for the belief of Rohit Sharma's side, Anil Kumble?
The belief itself, I think, 9 out of 9 coming into the semi-final, we knew that India had to win. India knew that, okay, this was the game that you had to win. All 9 is nothing if you don't win, and they can't come here and then boss the game in terms of getting to that score. And then on a tough pitch, tough opposition, they get the job done. I think that's the important aspect of playing a game. Everyone's put their hand up in different situations, and that's what you want from a team. And going into Ahmedabad, I'm sure tomorrow will be a relaxed day watching Australia take on South Africa, just to see who's going to be playing them in the final on Sunday. So it's just a matter of just taking a couple of days off. I mean, let's all remember that they played a match on Sunday, and just in 2 days they had to play a semi-final. So I'm sure a couple of days off, and looking forward to the final.
I think the debrief is going to be really important for India from a fielding perspective.
Yes.
That 3/4 of an hour where India was under pressure, saw a couple of drop catches, and that can really hurt you in a final position. So I compare this to sort of rugby union or rugby league, where most of the time finals are won by defensive efforts. So ultimately in cricket terms, that's not defensively with the bat and ball, that's defensively in the field. So you've got 2 great fielders in Kohli, ground fielders, and Jadeja, but you've also got some hands in that side that opposition sides will look at and go, if it's a high ball, make sure that you keep running. So I think India will go, guys, we've got to freshen up. We've got to be super committed to our defensive effort if we want to actually be on that podium lifting the World Cup.
Also maybe the extras. I mean, if you really want to sit down and work on that, that's something I'm sure the bowling coach will just pick it up.
Danny, final word from you. What a lovely start it's been. I wish we could have started sooner, but I'm sure it's the first of many. But final word for you as India march on to the final. Surely Australia, South Africa watching this and think, damn, we wished New Zealand would have pulled up the upset here, because clearly looks like India's the team to beat.
Well, they are. I think that Blue Army are the side to beat, and as Anil touched on, you do boss the game so well and put under pressure. And Haydos made a great analogy there in terms of staying in the game, but it's in the field, and you hear captains, you hear coaches, you hear us former players commentating it. It's about fielding and doing the basics well, keeping things very simple and uncluttered, but in the field is where you can make such a difference as a group. And you lift each other. So that whole energy and vibe within the team comes together when you're in the field. So it will be fascinating, because let's see, both those sides, whether it's South Africa or Australia, that get through to Ahmedabad for the final on Sunday, there's no doubt they'll put pressure on that Blue Army. And there's a lot of expectation, isn't there, for the land of $1 billion to lift that trophy on Sunday evening.
Danny Morrison,
look out.
Danny Morrison, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. Keep Queensland nice and clean for Matthew Hayden's return. Roll out the red carpet for him.
Good on you, Danny.
And get some sleep right now.
Good man.
Thank you very much to Matthew Hayden. I may or may not see you back in the studio in the next few days.
May not. No, may not.
That depends on how things happen, how things
It's
go.
always a great pleasure.
Yeah.
But I'd rather not be back, because it would only mean one thing.
Yes, you can do the math. But it's been brilliant having you, Haydos. I look forward to a lot more time on the ESPN Cricket Info studios with you. So Matthew Hayden, thank you. Anil Kumble, an absolute pleasure. We've seen history today from Tendul, from Kohli, from Shami, and from India. 10 wins in a row. It was already a record, the 9 that they edged through the league phase. Make that number now 10, sitting pretty behind Arguably the greatest ever team to play World Cup cricket. Some dispute from Clive Lloyd's West Indies in the early years, but if India win, they'll level Ponting's Australia from the wonderful years of 2003 and 7 that Matthew Hayden has recalled so beautifully. That's pretty much it. India march on to Ahmedabad. New Zealand bow out with a lot of grace. Australia and South Africa now play for the spoils of second finalists, not second place, but the second finalists at Eden Gardens tomorrow. Build up to that, 1:15. If you're in our part of the world, for Maruti Suzuki Arena presents ESPN Cricket for Matchday, powered by Qatar Airways. Do download the mobile app. So much being written and said. Kane Williamson has spoken. I'm sure questions would have been posed to him about his own future. And, of course, from the Indian camp, Mohammed Shami is just continuing to be this beast of a bowler in what is pretty much already a beast of a batting unit collectively. India to the finals then. We wait for Australia, South Africa tomorrow. Good night.
Stunning looks, then swift,